Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Zoo School Live. Thanks for being patient this morning. We had to push our time back a little bit, but we have something really cool to share with you guys today. Some of you may have celebrated over the weekend the holiday of Easter, and even if you didn't celebrate Easter, you're probably aware of the symbolism of the rabbit and the eggs that we often see around springtime. And this symbolism has been around for hundreds of years. The Easter Bunny is a pretty old guy. He's been running around, dropping by everyone's house, leaving gifts and eggs for a long, long time. Now, when we often associate the Easter Bunny with eggs and things like that, they're a little different from our real bunnies. So we actually have our real bunnies today. We can get a nice close look at them. We have Oliver and Chester with us today. They are our velveteen lock rabbits, and you may have seen them featured on some cute little videos on Facebook. They often come out, of course, around this time of year because they are super cute, and rabbits are very associated with spring. And that's not just because rabbits are often seen becoming more active this time of year. We generally, even if you live in a somewhat urban place, have probably seen rabbits about your neighborhood. They do live pretty close in contact with humans. They've done a really good job of adapting to living where we do and utilizing our yards and our farm fields as habitat. And they're also associated with spring, not just because of this activity, but because they are very prolific when it comes to reproduction. So they have lots and lots of babies, and they can have lots of babies very quickly. So they, as a prey species, an animal that is hunted and eaten by other animals, do reproduce a lot, and they reproduce at a very young age. So we often see this in spring with many animals laying eggs, building nests, raising their young. So rabbits have kind of become a symbol of this rebirth and this new life in the spring season. Now again, Oliver and Chester are a little different from our Easter Bunny. They would not lay eggs. They wouldn't show up in your backyard and bring you eggs, but they are instead going to have live babies. Now both of our rabbits are males. They are boys, so they're not going to have any babies of their own. But regular rabbits that you might find running around can have many, many babies, and they often will raise them in a small den. So this time of year is also when we hear a lot about people finding baby bunny nests in their yards when they're doing some yard cleanup for springtime. So it's important to remember that we share our homes and our habitats with many different species, rabbits included. So if you come across a rabbit nest, if you find baby bunnies, it's always good to try to leave them alone. I'm sure mom or dad are probably not too far behind. And if you just kind of leave them be and keep them in a safe place, they will be well taken care of. Of course, if you find an injured bunny, you can always reach out to your local wildlife rehabilitator. We do not take injured animals here at the zoo. We usually, all of our animals that came from rehabs come to us after going to a wildlife rehab and are assessed and cared for and, ended up becoming healthy but non-releasable. So if you have baby bunnies sharing your habitat, make sure you provide them a safe place, and they will usually do really well on their own. Now, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the egg side of Easter and spring. So I have some really cool stuff set up over here to show you guys. So many of you might have spent some time for the Easter holiday dyeing Easter eggs. Now, traditionally, a lot of times people will use food coloring for this, and they can produce some really awesome colors. But what I want to share with you guys today is how you can dye things using natural materials and stuff found right in your own grocery store, or even what you might already have in your kitchen. So we're going to take a look at a couple different types of dyes that you can make at home and the colors you might get. And some of it might be surprising. So first, let's come over and take a look at our eggs. These were all dyed yesterday and overnight. So you can see there's a nice wide variety of colors, and they're a little bit different than those bright pastels you might get with your food coloring. So they have a little more texture, they're a little more natural in color. And some even might look like an egg you could find laid by an actual bird. This one in particular I think looks very similar to what robins lay. Some of these darker greenish yellow ones, very similar to some of our birds of prey. So one of my favorite things about doing natural egg dyeing is that you get such an interesting range of colors and patterns many times, depending on how you do it. So I want you guys to take a look at these eggs and try to guess what types of materials were used to dye them. So I will point out that these eggs, these two, and these two were all the same material, these 4 were done with different materials. So looking at the colors and the textures that you see, I want you guys to think about what could you have in your fridge or what could you find at the grocery store that would produce these colors. Now, natural dyeing is not a new idea. It's been done for thousands of years by many different traditional peoples and even still today. And dye can be used for many different things, not just for eggs. It's fun to do in the spring because of the Easter season. But you can also use these materials to dye different fabrics and other things. So natural dyeing has been around for a long, long time, and it's something that's pretty simple you can still do at home. So if you want to take any guesses, you are welcome to put those in the comments. What colors do you think, or what kind of materials do you think gave us these colors today? And then we're going to go through and talk about the ingredients and how to do the dyeing. And again, just like other Zoo School Lives, if you have questions throughout, make sure you're posting those in the comments. We'll take some time at the end to go through. So check out those colors. We're going to start off with the pinks right here. So I'll kind of hold those up and show you guys a little bit better some of the really cool textures and patterns that we got. Now, you can do natural dyeing in a couple different ways. If you look online, there are so many different tutorials out there. I've been doing natural dyeing for several years now, and every year is a little bit different, which is kind of fun. I think it's a nice surprise. So remember, both of these eggs were done with the same material, but you can see one is significantly darker. It's still a little bit wet. So the one that's darker and wet was actually left in overnight, whereas this one, it's a little bit lighter in color and more dry, was done for about 4 hours and then removed from the dye. So I have my materials set up over here, and we can take a look. So the pink color is unsurprisingly from a beet. So beets, you can use both fresh beets or you can get canned beets. I will say that the fresh beets produce more of this kind of mottled color because you'll have parts of the skin and different parts of the beet itself in with the mixture. If you get canned beets, the skins have been removed, they've already been chopped, and they're super fresh or super clean because they don't have all those little bits and pieces inside of there. So this one was dyed with beets, and I'll show you guys what that juice looks like so you can kind of compare. We'll slide these guys over here. So here's the beet juice, and you can see it is a really beautiful pinkish purple. And it has a wonderful scent. If you like beets, you're going to enjoy cooking this in your kitchen because it's going to smell the whole place up. It has this really nice pink and purple dye to or color to it. Now I will warn you that this is probably one of the most staining dyes. So when you are preparing this dye, it's good to wear gloves just because the beet itself is able to stain your hands. So you can do it in 2 different ways. You can either prepare the fresh beet. I chopped it up into about dime-sized pieces, and then you're going to add it to your water. And the general rule of thumb is you want to do about 1 cup of your ingredient to each cup of water or dye you want to make. And it's about as simple as that. So for this, I used about 2 cups of chopped up beets because it's a little bit over 2 cups of water. And then you're going to boil that. And the boiling time is going to range for a lot of these ingredients, but the general rule of thumb is that the longer you boil it and the deeper your dye, the deeper your color, because your eggs are going to turn out several shades lighter than your dye. You can see these eggs are not bright pink and purple. They're a little bit more faded in coloration. So the longer you boil and the deeper hue you get with the dye, the better your color is going to be on your eggs. So that's the beets. And then the only other step really after you've boiled your ingredients is once you have your dye material, you can strain it out. So I did strain this liquid. I got all the little pieces of beet out. And then I let it sit and cool, and I added some vinegar. And you want to add about a tablespoon of vinegar per cup of water. So this has about 2 tablespoons of vinegar in it. So that's your beet. It gives you this beautiful pink. And again, the color does change depending on how long you leave it in. If you were only to dip your egg, for a few minutes and then remove it, let it dry, and then dip it again, you might have a lighter color pink. But I chose to leave some of it in overnight. And then I also chose to leave some in for just a few hours. So this is kind of a nice activity because it does take some prep time, but you can, once you have your dye made, you can set it and kind of forget it and then come back later and enjoy your eggs. So we'll move on from our beet red or pink to our next color. So that's our pink. Next we'll move on to our green. green yellow. So here's another example. Both of these are the same dye. The one that is slightly darker was left in overnight. The one that is more speckled and kind of light was left in for a few hours. Now this one might be a little bit surprising because you might expect to get a more vibrant color. But this one is done with spinach. And so when I prepare a dye with spinach, I use a lot of spinach to get the color I would like. And so you can kind of see here, this is the color dye you end up with. It's kind of a light pea green, I would call it. And you can see this one does have some residue in the bottom. And that's because it's really hard to strain out all the little pieces. So you can do it in a couple different ways. You could just put the whole leaf in there and rip it apart a little bit. What I did is actually used a food processor and ground it all up before boiling. So same rules apply. You use a cup of the material to every cup of water. I actually used a little bit more because I knew that spinach is hard to get a nice dark color. And you boil for as long as you possibly can. So I definitely boiled our spinach for about an hour compared to some of the others that were 15 to 20 minutes. And it doesn't come out with a bright green, it comes out with this nice kind of yellow green. So that's our spinach dye. So we'll go on to our next two. Now these two were done differently. So this is one of the colors here. I think this one looks super cool. It's kind of got like these brown speckles, almost looks like an explosion pattern on there. So that's one of them. And then this is the next one. Also very interesting pattern on it. So I would call this kind of like a reddish brown, and this one kind of a tan brown. So I have two different ingredients for this. The first one, the lighter tan brown, is actually going to be coffee grounds. And you can use, as far as I know, you can use any coffee grounds you want. I just went with a cheap grocery store brand. I got decaf because you don't really need caffeine for egg dyeing. And you would do this just the same way you would make a pot of coffee. You would boil the grounds. Now I used a heavy amount of grounds. And that's kind of why you see some of these little speckles here, because our coffee grounds are going to be a little bit muddy. It's again hard to strain all of the coffee grounds out. So that's the light brown. And then the darker red brown is actually going to be red onion skins. So this is a tradition some of you may have experienced before using onion skins. A lot of times people will use the yellow onion skins and you get more of an orange color. But the red onion skins give you this beautiful brownish red. Now this one was left to sit overnight. This one was only left for a few hours. So again, that shows you some of the difference in the coloration you're going to get. If you're wondering, how do you get a bunch of red onion skins without buying a bunch of onions? I literally go to the grocery store and I clean out the bottom of the bin. Now obviously during COVID, be very careful. Don't be feeling around and touching every one of the onions, but you can usually ask one of the grocery store clerks if they can assist you. And when you go to checkout, just be like, hey, I have this weird bag of skins, and they usually just let you take it because they just have to throw that stuff out anyway. So yeah, I used a lot more onion skins than just the cup rule. I actually used about 2 cups per cup of water, mostly because when they're dry, you know, they take up a lot more space. You kind of have to account for that when you're putting in your ingredients. But they really come out with this beautiful kind of reddish brown. And then again, there's our coffee, which is kind of more of a tan brown color. Those two are kind of two of my favorites, even though they're not the bright flashy colors. So we'll move on here. So that's our coffee and our onion. The next two are very vibrant and a little bit of a surprise as far as what ingredients were used. So the bright yellow, you can see, is probably our most vibrant color. Now something that does sometimes happen is you'll get some residue that does wipe off a little bit as you touch it, and you can either wipe all that off or you can use it kind of to keep it textured. And this yellow one was done using turmeric. So turmeric is something you probably have in your cabinet if you've ever done any kind of cooking with different spices. And in this one, you don't need the 1 cup per 1 rule. You definitely want to use less because it is a condensed spice. So I used, let's see, about 3 tablespoons total. So I used probably around a tablespoon of turmeric per cup of water to get this bright yellow. And this one was left to sit overnight. So you can see that really vibrant color. This is another one that will stain everything it touches. So use gloves or be very careful in your kitchen when you are making it, unless you want everything to be nice and bright and yellow. Now the blue one is probably going to be a little bit startling to some of you guys. So We have a couple different ingredients on the table here. It is not going to come from a material that is actually blue. It's going to come from red or purple cabbage. So you get this awesome blue color by using the leaves of this purple, or sometimes people call it red cabbage. And for this one, it's the same rule. You want to chop it up and do that 1 cup per 1 cup. Now this one was left to sit all the way overnight. So you can actually see there's a couple different layers of blue on there. But this is one of my favorite colors because the water itself looks bright purple. We can kind of see here, here's my red cabbage. So it looks almost like violet colored, but it produces that amazing blue. So very different color. And you can actually see the change in the tone right there, which is awesome. So again, the length of time you leave your egg in will change the vibrancy of the color. If you just do a few dips, you'll probably get a nice light blue egg. So last but not least here in our ingredients section is going to be our light gray and dark gray eggs. So these have a couple different colors going on. They look almost like a steel gray, silver, and then this one has some little tones of brown and green in it. So these were done with the same dye. This one was only left, or this one was left for a couple hours. This one was left overnight, so you can see that shade difference. And these were done with blueberries. So this is actually probably the best blueberry dye I've ever gotten. I've tried this a lot, and I never get such a nice color. I don't know what I did differently this time. But blueberries can be tricky because they are a little, they're not quite true to what you would think. So again, the dye is going to be more of a purple color. And for them, similar to the spinach, I ground up all the ingredients and I used a food processor, so they were basically like mush, and then added them into the water. And because it's really hard to strain when you do that, you get a lot of little sediments. So that's why they have kind of this mottled appearance here. But again, I think it looks really cool. So you get more of this like blue silver versus the bright blue. So comparing that to the red cabbage, you can see the difference in coloration there, which is pretty startling. So these are just a few ingredients that you probably have lying around, or you can easily go to the grocery store and pick up. And again, the only thing you really have to do is rip them up, combine them with some water, and boil them for a little bit, and add in your white vinegar. Now the reason you want to add in the white vinegar for your dye is because that helps to set the color. It helps to break down the egg's shell. These eggs are just your standard white extra large. And what I did before I even put them in is I did pre-boil them, and then I cleaned them with a light soap and water solution. So that starts the process of kind of getting any of the oils off the eggshell. And then that white vinegar helps to let the dye soak in, because those eggs are protected. Naturally, they're protected to keep the little baby chick safe, so that we have to remove that in order to get the dye. Now you can also use brown eggs, but keep in mind if you use brown chicken eggs, you're going to get some different variations. You might get more of a green tone with your blues and your yellows, and more of a darker brown for your greens and your browns and pinks. So keep that in mind. You still can use them. By no means do you have to use white eggs, but you might just have some different colors. So we're gonna hop back over to our bunnies and take a look at them, and we'll see if we have any questions in the comments. So we're going to see hi to Mr. Chester and Oliver. So again, these bunnies do not lay eggs. They are not Easter bunnies. They would have live babies. And Chester and Oliver came to the zoo a few years ago. They are brothers, so they're from the same litter, and they are a velveteen lot, which is basically just talks about the breed that they are. So you can see they're a lop. They have those really floppy ears. And they have very, very soft fur. So we're gonna say hi to Mr. Oliver here, see if we can see an up close on his fur. It's very, very smooth and velvety. And this species, this breed, was actually named after the childhood book, The Velveteen Rabbit. So some of you maybe when you were younger, or if you guys are younger now, may have read this story about the Velveteen Rabbit, and so because of that soft fur, that's where they got their name. So they are, I believe they're about 3 years old this year, and they're full size for the most part. They might get a little bit larger than this, but not by a whole lot. And they've been out a lot the last couple weeks for our Easter brunches, and they make a lot of appearances in the spring when it's nice and warm. They really enjoy having outside sunshine time. So we can hang out with our bunnies. We can take another look at our eggs. If we have any questions, remember, this is your chance to put them in the comments. If you have anything you'd like to know about the dyeing process, it's pretty straightforward. And again, if you look online, there's a lot of great information out there about how to dye. There's other types of materials you can use. Those are just the common ones that I found very helpful. So we can take a look real quick again and go through those ingredients. So we have our spinach here, and that is going to give us this nice light green color. We have our beets, bright pink, and you can use both fresh and canned beets. You can do either. We have our coffee and our onion skins. So there's coffee with our coffee colored dye and our onion skins here with, oh, I didn't show you guys, I don't think, our onion dye. So this one's kind of a tannish red color, a little different than what you might expect. And then that bright blue is going to be our red cabbage, one of my favorite colors, and then turmeric for our bright yellow, pretty easy to come by in your grocery store. And last but not least is our blueberries. So I hope you guys enjoyed learning all about our different natural dyes. And even though the Easter season has passed, this is still a very fun spring activity. And these are all totally safe. So that's one of the really cool benefits to using natural dyes, is you don't have to worry about any additives or chemicals that are used in your traditional dye colors. And these are generally safe for most people. Obviously, if you have a food allergy, take that into account before you start making dyed eggs. But these are totally safe and ready to be eaten. And we might be giving them to some of our animals to enjoy. So if we do that, we'll share that with you guys on Facebook. So just like other days, please, if you are watching this later on, leave your comments down in the section for us to answer later. And we will see you guys again on Thursday for the next episode of Zoo School Live. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and thanks for tuning in.